Are we all ready?
Yeah.
Ian?
Yes.
You ready? Okay. Welcome to Telford Wrekin Council Planning Committee. Today's meeting is held in public to ensure that all those involved or interested in the planning applications can see and hear how the decisions are made. It's important that the speakers are able to present their information without interruption and that the council members of the committee are able to hear and consider the material presented. Only those people who have been notified are able to speak. I'll ask everyone else to remain quiet, not to interrupt the meeting, and to allow members to make their decisions. I remind everyone that council meetings can be photographed or recorded, and I ask all participants to recognise the importance of the planning process. And please will everyone silence or turn off their mobile phones. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
There have been apologies for absence from Councillor Raj Mehta and Councillor Janice Jones. Councillor Kelly Middleton has sent her apologies, and Councillor James Lavery will substitute for her, and Councillor Jackie Loveridge sent apologies with Councillor Sahota substituting.
Okay, that's the apologies. Any declarations of interest?
TWC 2021-0046, the Buxton one. I'm on the parish council, but I don't take part in any of the planning committee meetings at all, and I'm also chairman of the Granville Country Park management committee.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Any other declarations? Jim?
I'm on the same parish council and we don't attend planning meetings.
Thank you, Jim. Any more? No? They're okay, aren't they, Ian? Yeah, okay. Item 3, deferred withdrawn applications. There are none, are there?
There are none, Chair.
Site visits, we had one this morning.
And I would like to request one for the next meeting, please, Chair.
Which is the 2nd of June.
Should be, yes. And that is TWC 2020-1076, which is for land opposite 15 to 22 Woodside, Coalbrookdale. And that's the erection of one dwelling within the World Heritage Site.
Okay, can you make a note of that site visit, proposed site visit? It'll come out, we'll send an email out anyway. Won't we, Kieran? Thank you. Right. Item 5 is the plan application for determination. Now, they're not in the order on the, as they say on the paper. What we're going to do is TWC 2021 0046 on page 125, which is first. TWC 2010 0828, which is the second one, which is on page 5. Then 2020 0047, Lawley phase 11, that's on page 13. TWC 2020 1087 is on page 65. And finally 2021 0010 Hortonwood 40 on page 103. That's the running order, okay? So the first one is page 125. Who's presenting this?
That will be myself, Chair.
Okay, Mark. Thank you.
So the application site is located within Donington, Telford, approximately 4 kilometres to the north of the Telford town centre. The site was previously part of Granville colliery, with this use of the land coming to an end circa 1970. Housing with the local area is a mix, providing a diverse character, including 2- and 3-storey houses and apartments. Surrounding uses comprise residential dwellings at Donington Wood, employment uses to the south, leisure uses and open countryside. Granville Country Park lies to the east of the site and contains a nature reserve, SSSI and a scheduled ancient monument. A good range of services and local amenities, including primary schools, medical centres and shops, are located within a short distance of the site. A large supermarket at Granville Roundabout is within 500 metres and walking distance of the majority of the site and the public houses within short commute. The total site area of 14.5 hectares comprises 3 distinct but connected parcels of land of varying ground levels. Site boundaries are a mix of trees, shrubs, raised land and wooden fencing. The site is also within Flood Zone 1, the lowest level of flood risk. An adopted footpath link runs through the centre of the site, linking into Granville Country Park to the east of the development. This is a full planning application for the construction of 233 dwellings, a 76-unit care home with car parking and community hub, 20 units supported accommodation, areas of public open space and local equipped area of play, access, drainage and associated works on land between Donington Woodway and Granville Road. As I've noted, the site is divided into 3 parcels, including 90 affordable rent dwellings, as proposed, 76 bed extra care building, 77 market dwellings, 66 private rented sector units, 20 supported accommodation units, 500 square metre leap, and circa 2.5 hectares of open space, alongside 77 market dwellings. And an additional 1.76 hectares of open space connecting to the country park, which includes the drainage system. Of the 233 dwellings, it is proposed, and I'll come on to this later, that 90 of those units are affordable, and 596 car parking spaces are proposed to be provided across the entire development. A series of public representations have been received, making observations in respect to the principal development, highways and transport, drainage, ecology, residential amenity, housing mix, infrastructure and environmental issues. Furthermore, Donington and Muxton Parish Council, whilst welcoming the development, do note concerns, including the impact of the development upon local archaeology, schools, GP surgery, drainage, geotechs, and concerns regarding the proposed or highway strategy. But no technical objections have been received from statutory consultees, subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I have 2 speakers down for this one. Councillor Adrian Lawrence, Ward Councillor. Got 3 minutes, Adrian.
Well, thank you. Thank you, members. Residents have asked me to speak in objection to this issue. It's understood by residents that there will always be some development here because it's always been in the development plan. So there's not a sort of resistance totally to any form of development. Donington and Muxton Neighbourhood Development Plan has been put forward. This report here refers to it as being only limited weight, but our understanding is that the further through the process it is, the more weight that should be given to it. We're already past our consultation period, which ended 15th of May, so I would argue that more weight should be applied to that because it's a policy that's very close to coming to fruition. Residents are sort of upset or miffed, if you want to say, by the access development. I understand the access has been built independently and separately grant funded from this application, but the problem is it's a big access point with traffic lights, and it gives a serious perception to residents of predetermination that this application is going to go ahead, the access has been built, and then it's going to be a large-scale development because of the size of the access has been built. It would have been much, much better for residents if this planning application had come forward earlier and first before that development had been given the go-ahead, because residents constantly say to me, this is all predetermined, you've already built that and we haven't even had the planning meeting yet. So aside from that, what would be supportable would be a smaller scale development with a lot less properties that would overcome residents' concerns, which are about overdevelopment, the burden it places on education, health, etc., and then the amount of traffic that goes onto those access points. So the sort of concept behind the Muxton and Donington development plan is small infill developments with emphasis on retirement bungalows, which would fit very well in the sort of requirements for Muxton and Donington. We've got a real shortage of bungalows other than at the Fieldhouse Drive end, but there's no provision for that in this application. So residents would ask, if you're unable to reject this application, to scale it down more in keeping with their aspirations, which is a small infill type of development, and not the larger scale development we have here. I think there's one minor point someone else made to me, that this refers to Donington as being the area. It's actually in Muxton Ward. I mean, it's the Donington Wood area, but Donington Wood is partly in Muxton and partly in Donington, so I think it's just incorrect. It's Muxton and not Donington. And there you have it. So it's just too big a development, all the traffic issues and the burden that then places on the infrastructure, education, hospitals, and so health, and etc., etc. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Adrian. Can I call on Mr. S. Thompson, please, the representative of the registered provider? Mr. Thompson, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. So I'm Simon Thompson. I'm the Director of Development from the Wrekin Housing Group, and I'm here to speak in support of this development, this exciting development that's going ahead. Well, we hope will go ahead. Of the all the units, we'll be taking 186 for affordable use on the site. We completely understand why the constraints of the site around viability are stopping it from the affordable housing coming through the usual route of a Section 106. But actually going through this route, being a grant-funded scheme, which it will be, we'll be seeking circa £9 million worth of Homes England grant funding to make it work, has really helped us to get involved at a very early stage and influence the design of the site to make sure we can put forward something that will really meet the needs of the people in that local area. What we proposed on the site is there'll be a 76-unit extra care facility. Within that, there'll be 12 dementia care apartments also, and 20 supported living apartments, so all in one area of the site with community facilities. And the idea really is that we want to help people to stay in their homes for as long as possible. And even if people in the area can't stay in the particular house because their needs change, the idea is, because there's so many different types of housing on this particular development, we'll be able to stay in the area, we'll be able to move them into a type of accommodation that suits their given needs. The block is also very community facing as well. In the hub, there's lots of community facilities, including a bistro, a cafe, an IT lounge that will be open to the public and with free Wi-Fi. And again, the idea really is, with the changing scene of the world of COVID-19, many people are having to work from home. If their home environment doesn't suit working from home, they can come to the local community IT lounge, work freely from in an area that will suit their needs. There'll be 2 communal areas that will be open for classes, various types of classes, or engagement parties, or whatever the community wants to use them for. We've engaged with the parish council, lots of different community groups, really with the ethos of not wanting to draw away from existing community facilities, but rather enhance them and bring something to the table that isn't there already. There'll be a new play area, there'll be greenways, the cycle paths, the footpaths will all be enhanced to improve the connectivity between Granville Park and Donington Wood Way. So we are really in support of this exciting development. We feel it's got the community at its heart, and we really do feel it will make a difference to people's lives. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you. Mark, it's back to you.
Thank you, Joe. So the site is located within the Telford urban area and has no formal designation, therefore suitable in principle for residential development, subject to overcoming all relevant technical considerations. Donington and Muxton Parish Council, within their neighbourhood development plan submitted for consultation, note that development of new housing will be supported within the built-up areas and on sites identified within the local plan. Further noting, the need for high-quality place-led design will be supportive, and new housing development will be expected to achieve high standards of design. The Donington and Muxton Neighbourhood Development Plan is therefore considered to be broadly supportive of residential development within the development site and within built-up areas. In respect of highway works completed to date on Donington Wood itself, these are quite separate to the current planning application. The works undertaken are, however, appropriate insofar as the access infrastructure adheres to the requisite design standards and has taken account of all local committed development and predicted future growth in the area. Turning to matters of design, policy BE1 of the local plan seeks to ensure that developments are designed to respect their surroundings and contribute positively to the character of the area. The development site is wholly contained within a predominantly woodland setting, whereby no single dominant built form feature is inherent, such that it's considered that any development must respond positively to its woodland setting, incorporating features including but not limited to strategic planting along the western boundary, parcel B being more enclosed with a woodland feel to its character, the retention and enhancement of green networks through the site, and the provision of a local equipped area of play within the public space located centrally within the site. The scheme proposes a series of public open spaces which are connected with footways and cycleways to encourage movement through the site. A large open space draws residents to the centre of the site, providing an enjoyable natural open space for all. The extra care facility is located within the heart of the development and is intended to be at the heart of the community. A community hub will encourage all members of the community to connect with each other, providing mutual support. A consistent material palette has been used throughout the development. In keeping with policy H2, gabled frontages are prominent in the local area, and this has been carried through in the development elevations. A blend of simple contemporary detailing on a traditional form creates a unique high-quality development which responds positively to the local context. The residential units used in the proposed scheme include detached, semi-detached and bungalow dwellings. The house types are intended to be tenure blind throughout the development, creating an inclusive development. In respect of the extra care facility, the scheme is formed of a pair of blocks within the same architectural language. A grid of vertical brick columns form a consistent framework and create a rhythm to the longer facades, with the gable ends accentuated by these columns projecting above the roofline. The central wing contains a community hub which can be used by the wider community and also forms the central communal area for residents. In respect of energy efficiency and sustainability, the scheme incorporates an energy efficient specification for the main body of units. However, is also targeting achieving the future home standard as part of its overall energy and sustainable strategy for 14 of the units. Turning to the issue of affordable housing, the applicants have provided a viability appraisal undertaken by Harris Lamb to demonstrate that bringing the site forward is not viable, instead proposing 0% affordable housing. Notwithstanding this, the applicants have provided an affordable housing units layout plan as part of the current application, and the local authority understands that it is the applicant's intention, and they are in advanced stages to explore other avenues to deliver affordable housing outside of the planning process. Overall, the development is considered to accord with policies SP1 and SP4 of the Telford Wrekin plan, whereby the principle of residential development remains acceptable. The proposal has been designed to a high level using a mixed palette of materials, incorporating environmental and sustainable credentials, and has been laid out satisfactorily and can be accommodated by the surrounding highway network. The proposal will not adversely affect European protected species or wildlife habitats, and enhancement will be provided through conditions and financial contributions. There are considered to be no technical issues that would prevent the development from proceeding, nor issues that cannot be mitigated through the use of appropriate conditions. Accordingly, the development is considered to represent a sustainable form of development which complies with the National Planning Policy Framework. To address a number of issues raised by Councillor Lawrence, in respect of the neighbourhood plan, the council can only afford limited weight to that. It does gather kind of more weight as it goes through the process, but we are at that very early stage where it has been submitted to the council for consultation at this stage. So that's why there is that very limited weight. In terms of the seeking a smaller scale of development on the sites, in accordance with the NPPF, that there's kind of local authorities are encouraged to make the best and most efficient use of the land. So in terms of the development put forward, it's considered an appropriate density of housing across the site. And finally, in respect of retirement bungalows, within paragraph 8.9.4 of the officer report, this talks about the development providing a mix of housing, including 23 bungalows, including 14 M42 or M43 and 4 houses for people with physical disabilities. So there is a significant number of bungalows provided across the site. Overall then, it's recommended that delegated authority be granted to the Development Service Manager, subject to a memorandum of understanding with the local authority regarding local highway infrastructure improvements, the upgrading of footpath routes in Granville Country Park, primary and secondary school education provision, public open space and Great Creston district licensing and ecology net gain, and the conditions as outlined within the report to committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Out to the committee. Nigel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right, okay. I mean, with this development, I mean, it's been in the making for quite a while, really, and as has been mentioned, the land was always going to be developed, so it's trying to make the best of it. I mean, there are many elements of it which to be welcomed. Unfortunately, there are some that are rather unwelcome. I mean, with regards to just mentioned about the schooling, the local primary schools are full, and there's very limited, if any, room to expand them. I know that there is a new primary school on the cards for Priorslee, but we have to remember that there's along Donington Wood Way in the next few years there's going to be over 1,000 dwellings going just in Muxton itself. So the schools are a particular concern, and although welcome contributions to education, I'm not too sure where it's going to be spent and whether or not it's going to be local. On 2.7 of the report, it mentions about connectivity with the buses. It mentions buses you can get the bus from High Mount to Asda. Well, if you're going from the new development to Asda, you wouldn't walk past Asda to High Mount to get the bus to come back to Asda, would you? You just walk to Asda. So it does seem a bit, sort of. I do think that perhaps the report should have been a little bit investigated at that point. I do share, being a resident myself, and as soon as I saw this development, the highways issues is the thing that really struck, because that particular route along Donington Wood Way, it is the signposted route to the MOD, and it's also a major route to Horton Wood, and as anybody who goes on it anywhere near rush hour, the traffic is stationary between the two roundabouts. I mean, obviously we've been a bit spoilt during the lockdown because the road system has been able to cope. Although interestingly, now that a lot of the infrastructure, the highway infrastructure, is already in place, and temporary traffic lights have been put by where the permanent traffic lights are going to go, we've had traffic backing all the way up Donington Wood Way. So I am very concerned about the impact of the development, and as I said, there are 600 odd houses to go at the top of the Red Hill as well, and of course Priorslee is going to get a significant increase in dwellings. So there is going to be very significant pressure on on that part of the highway network. I do query the bus stops. Bus stops have been put on the highway. I would much have preferred Donington Woodway to have been dual carriageway between those two roundabouts, but anyway, that was not to be, and we've now got bus stops, but actually it's single carriageway, and there aren't bus lay-bys, which I'm absolutely astonished about. So it does mean that at peak times, as well as 2 sets of traffic lights and a pedestrian crossing, you'll also have stationary buses while they're actually picking people up. So quite honestly, well, I'm absolutely astonished that the buses, that the bus stops are actually on the highway and not on a lay-by. The 7.9.2, there is a concern. We've got Muxton Marsh is a triple SI, and basically, if the drainage of this development does affect the water flow to Muxton Marsh, we could potentially lose Muxton Marsh. I know that there has been some work modelling it, but it is a concern, and certainly once it's built, if there is an impact on Muxton Marsh, there'll be very little that we can do about it. It'll be too late by then. I do welcome financial contribution. Just coming back to highways, there's potentially some contribution to help with Donington Wood Way junction with Wellington Road and Marshbrook Way at the opposite end, which does need a roundabout, and we've been pressing for a roundabout for quite a considerable amount of time, because people who live off Marshbrook Way cannot get out at the junction of Marshbrook Way and Donington Wood Way nearest to the clock tower, and so all the traffic goes through the roundabout, which is just close to this development. So we do need to look at that, and it is quite a concern. I welcome the bungalows. We're always going on about bungalows, and we do require bungalows because it helps to release properties in the chain, and so I'm pleased that there are some bungalows, and I would have liked more of them. On 8.12.2, I'd just like a bit of a brief explanation from the officer about what a thermal envelope is, and just to make sure that I've got it right in my mind. And at 8.12.4, welcome the inclusion of solar panels and other sustainable energy ways of getting sustainable energy. Can't think of my words at the moment. And I do hope that all the dwellings are all able to support electric charging points, because obviously moving forward in a few years' time, everybody's going to be on electric vehicles. Obviously, a bit disappointed with the affordable housing, but I'm sick to death of saying I'm disappointed with the lack of affordable housing, because you can't get away from the viability arguments. And as Chairman of the Granville Country Park Management Committee, I welcome the contribution to upgrading the footpaths, but I would like that condition broadened a little bit to give us a bit more flexibility, because yes, we do need footpaths upgrading, but it would also be nice to be able to spend some of that money on improving the facilities at Granville Country Park. So, yes, improve the footpaths and facilities in Granville Country Park, because we've been discussing looking at play equipment in there, children's trail, things like, I don't know if anybody's been to Cannock Chase, they've got a Gruffalo trail. We were looking at things like that, but we've never actually had any funding to do that. So I would like, if this application is going to go ahead, well then, I'd like that condition broadened a little bit. And finally, I'd just like to say, regarding the traffic, as I say, that's the biggest concern as far as residents go. I'm not sure if you can, but included in the as one of the conditions, could we have a fixed review period of the traffic movements on Donington Wood Way? perhaps when there's 50% occupation on the site and 100% occupation on the site, because I think what many residents are concerned about is the fact that this development goes ahead, and you know, that like them, I'm not totally convinced that that the highway is going to be able to cope with it. But it would be nice to have a review point, so that at least we could, you know, sort of either be proved wrong or at least prove that there needs to be further highway improvements. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Mark, do you want to come back on all that lot?
I will. In terms of some of the highway matters that you've raised, Councillor Dugmore, I'll probably kind of part those for the highway engineer to address in a bit more detail, and then after it is the planning related ones I can kind of clarify thereafter. So in terms of the education provision, the kind of calculations for the financial contributions and the need and whether improvement facilities can be made or kind of additional capacity, that matter is assessed by kind of the relevant education and young people's team to kind of establish whether there is capacity at those kind of schools within the locality. Their view in terms of requesting the figure is clearly that there is kind of capacity through requesting those funds. In terms of you've raised about Muxton Marsh, particularly in respect of kind of the hydrological kind of issues and such. That was a matter that was picked quite early on in the application process through the Shropshire Wildlife Trust. That was a matter that was considered in greater depth with the developers and also our own ecological team in conjunction with Natural England, such that they were kind of satisfied with the kind of proposed strategy as put forward. In terms of the thermal envelope, it essentially comes down to the insulation within the properties. So, like with a normal envelope, you seal it and it's all kind of contained. So it's that layer within the properties to kind of ensure that they remain tight, I suppose, in terms of insulation. I believe that kind of considered the non-highway issues. So, I kind of ask you just to comment.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the first point to make is that the access infrastructure that's gone in has been designed up to 2039, so it's there's been some extensive modelling works carried out, including committed development. So for both the roundabouts at either end of Donington Wood Way in relation to the application site, they've been modelled and they're operating well within desirable capacity up till 2039. And then in terms of the actual signal junctions that have gone in, they are obviously designed with that year in mind as well. The advantage we've got obviously with signals is that we can dictate the green time between the lanes, so they can be an element of stacking on the kind of development access roads in, so more green time can be given to Donington Wood Way to kind of ensure that there's that free flow of traffic. So we haven't got any concerns from that perspective in terms of that capacity. Obviously that extensive modelling's kind of been taking place in the background to get to this point.
What about the bus stops?
So the bus stop locations, they've gone through the road safety audit process and nothing was flagged up in terms of that causing any reason for a safety issue.
Well, it wasn't safety, it was traffic flow, really.
Again, in terms of the frequency, it will be very minor delays, and the frequency of the bus service won't be to an extent that will cause any significant traffic delay there.
Okay.
I think just the final kind of issue you raised was regarding the footpath and upgrading and kind of provision. That's certainly, I totally understand kind of what you kind of said there, and I think that would be a good point of kind of entering into that dialogue with our public rights of way officer to kind of see whether that flexibility and broadening of that condition, as you kind of suggest, is would kind of work and be to the benefit of the development.
Well, certainly, I mean, if it could be,
Yeah.
some wording could be put in there, that would be great.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, yeah. Just a few points really, because Nigel's covered quite a few of the points I was going to, so thank you for that. One of the questions I'm asked a lot, and I'm sure other people are, is why was that the access roads built before planning permission was given? I'm not suggesting anything underhand, it's just that I'd like to be able to answer people on this one, because it does seem predetermined, although we know it's not. So that's one point. Yeah, it's disappointing again that affordable housing hits the buffers. You did say, Mark, that there are plans to look to deliver affordable housing. Could you tell us a bit more about how that might happen, please? Sure. And just a couple of comments, really, already been touched on. It'd be great if the school money is spent in the locality of this and not somewhere else. That must happen. And electrical charging points, they are the future, they tell us. Just how many are we going to have here, and what's the general sort of thought on the future, because it will be the future. So thank you.
Okay. In terms of the access road and why that's kind of come first, I believe there was it ultimately came down to an award of funding which kind of allowed those highway improvement works to take place, and just the timing of it and coinciding. In respect of the affordable housing, essentially the applicants are in dialogue with Homes England through grant funding. In order to achieve grant funding, there can be no kind of restriction in terms of a Section 106 or a Memorandum of Understanding or any other agreement. There can be nothing like that in place. That would kind of prohibit them from kind of proceeding along that route, and that's why there is, as part of this application, there's nothing to kind of achieve that. So as I understand, as kind of touched upon earlier, the Housing Trust is in dialogue with the applicants and Homes England about kind of proceeding on the basis of the provision within the site. In terms of school funding and monies collected through the Memorandum of Understanding, the purpose of that, the collection of that money is to kind of serve the development. So absolutely kind of agree with that being to serve the uses of the development. And then the final point regarding the electric vehicle points. I can't say for certain, but my understanding was, in terms of the broad environmental kind of benefits of this development, and that kind of strategy, is that they can be kind of across all the units. I don't think it's just the 14. That's my understanding. But in terms of the provision of those EVs, it's certainly something through the that we would be seeking to encourage a lot more in developments coming forward. It's essentially quite a cheap and easy win for developments, and it's a lot cheaper to provide at the outset than to retrofit at a later stage. So certainly it's something we are or would seek to encourage from developers moving forward.
Okay, just a point. If these access points were built, did you ever conceive the possibility that it would be refused? And where would you be with them?
I mean, in terms of that, I suppose that's a question for kind of highways. The role, or my role, is just to kind of consider the planning merits. Of
I only say
the
that because it's a question I'm sure other members have been asked about this, and we need to be clear that there's nothing on the hand going on here. It is what it is, you know. So
yeah, in terms of my role as planning officer, I haven't been involved in anything regarding the highway work, so it's quite distinct and separate.
Okay, so was that considered?
That's the same case for me, in terms of that I've obviously been tasked to judge the application on the merits of what the current access infrastructure is. And I know that's only gone in recently, but again, that's not something I've had involvement with.
Interesting, thank you.
Just following on from that, members, the existence of the of these elements of highway that are already there can't be irrelevant to your considerations today. The fact that they're there already doesn't actually affect what's bearing on your decision today.
Oh, it's not. It's not. I'm just
No,
pointing to the
that's
fact
what I
that
meant.
people are saying, and they have said directly to me, if this gets refused, what are you going to do with those entrance points?
No, I'm pleased it's been raised because it gives you that transparency. But as I think Mark was just sort of touching on, it doesn't affect the decision today, does it?
Well, they wouldn't know.
No.
But I would like to know, that's all. And
No, it's good.
I'm not really had an answer, but I'm getting towards where you are with it still.
Well,
Thank you.
Can I give you the answer to that?
Yes, please.
You find one or two of it around the town where they've got roads with an entrance on them. It goes back to Telford Development Corporation's master plan. And that's where it was. And they decided that this land was for housing, but they then put the entrance in because it was cheaper to do it then. But it was a Telford Development Corporation master plan. It goes back to the 80s, 1980s.
I was but a child, but thank you. Okay.
Oh, before I'll give the age, I'll remember it. Councillor Sahota.
Oh, I just on application details. I was just looking at 233 dwellings and bungalows and so on. But there's only just a scant mention of the car parking and the community hub use. Are they the car parking comes with the driveways and so on, or if there's a communal car parking, is there any adequate parking there or something? There's nothing there. You just mentioned, with car parking and community hub.
In terms of the parking provision, so each of the residential typical houses has its own on-plot allocated parking provision. In terms of the extra care in the community hub, if we've got the picture of the kind of master plan of the site, you can see kind of centrally, almost kind of centrally, you've got that kind of parking area there. So that's to serve the intended extra care facility and the community use.
All right, thanks for clarifying that.
Any further comments? Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little concerned with this application, especially the fact that we are not going to get any affordable housing in line with our current policy. I mean, I've read their viability appraisal section where the developer expects to make a profit margin of nearly 40%, and it's not going to, so they're not going to do anything about affordable housing. And then they come along with this scheme that if you don't put a section 106, we'll talk to Housing of England, etc., and try and get grants to provide some affordable housing, but you can't. It's not being guaranteed. So we could be approving this application with no affordable housing and never going to get any, which goes well away against what our policies are. The relevant paragraph is 8.13.5, etc., and 8.13.6. Now, going back to the education, the report says that there's no room in the local primary schools for the housing for the children from this development. The suggestion they could come to Prisley. Well, I'm the councillor of Prisley, and I know how many houses you've already been approved for Prisley. It's into nearly 2,000 houses, and the current schools there are full, primary schools. There's going to be another one specifically to accommodate all the extra housing in Prisley, and they won't take any from any other area because none of these houses in this development are actually in the attendance area for Prisley. And then the secondary education, of course, secondary education, this area should go to
TPS.
Telford Primary School, isn't it? Or
Primary.
rather than HTA. And HDA's over full, and they're having to extend that by another 300 people, 300 places, to accommodate all the people in Priority. So they're asking for education money, and I'm not so sure that they're going to be able to for the primary. They're going to have to build a new school in that area, and there isn't the room for it. So this worries me, and I'm not so sure I can support it, Chairman.
In kind of addressing both of those points, so in terms of the education provision and the statement of the kind of lack of capacity within the existing schools, I think you're referencing the comment within the public consultation. So it's the local residents within paragraph 6.8 of the officer committee report, which kind of referenced the kind of lack of capacity. That has clearly, as I mentioned earlier, been reviewed by the relevant kind of professional within the council who's kind of come to the view in asking for that money that it can be achieved. Turning to the point of affordable housing, so it's that this matter is kind of addressed within section 8.13. In particular, kind of noting through the submission of the viability report, it's been determined that if the scheme were expected to provide for affordable housing, the scheme just wouldn't be viable. In line with the MPPF, where developments aren't viable, then through the submission of viability appraisals, and if the scheme isn't viable, then we may kind of have to take a hit on the provision of affordable housing. That's what's kind of proposed here. To provide any affordable housing would make that scheme unviable. So in this case, noting that in theory they could kind of continue with a scheme with no affordable housing, and in my mind we still wouldn't be able to kind of necessarily refuse an application on that basis. Here, the applicants and the housing association are in meaningful discussions with Homes England to look at the provision of securing that affordable housing through this Homes England grant funding, and that is the mechanism and strategy to achieve that. And unfortunately, that the process doesn't allow for the council to kind of secure that through a Section 106 or any other agreement. That is the only way whereby that may be achieved. So a balanced view has had to come down on that, but in order to try the best attempt possible to achieve that affordable housing is through that Homes England grant funding and the strategies as outlined.
Okay. Any further, Jim?
I'm going to come back to education again. The parish has 4 primary schools and no secondary schools. The report mentions St Matthew's and the Priorslee Primary School as being the main source for the children to go to. But what will happen in real terms is that the selection of pupils for these schools will push other pupils that would normally go there into other schools that won't receive any benefit from this inclusion, like Donington Wood Junior School and Donington Wood Infant School won't get any benefit, but they will get extra pupils as a knock-on effect of the consequences of this, because as the new residents move in, they'll get preference over the ones further away from the said schools, and therefore they will be left with the second choice to go to, and those schools will get no support at all. As far as the medical centre is concerned, I'm keen to know if any discussions has taken place with the doctors or the medical centre on their ability to cater for the extra population that we're now introducing into the area. That they're going to have to care for. Because I do know that there were a lot of people that tell me there were long waiting lists to get appointments, etc., etc. At present, how is it going to cope with the additional business, including a lot of pensioners who are at the age that needed medical attention more so than the younger people in affordable housing?
Thank you. In terms of the, I suppose, addressing the latter point first, the medical provision and kind of surgeries, that would be a matter for consideration by the clinical commissioning group for Telford and Shropshire. So it would be kind of their responsibility to ensure whether they kind of have that dialogue with the relevant surgeries or GPs or doctors.
We read in the report that there was adequate medical facilities.
There's doctors within the locality that kind of constitute that it's a sustainable location and kind of with within proximity to those kind of facilities. In terms of education provision, as you noted, the monies as outlined within the report and the contributions, it doesn't state which schools they are going to go to, so it would be through the dialogue with kind of the young people services to determine where best that money would be kind of set. That's not my kind of area of expertise, but through the consultation with them, they would then enter into that continuing dialogue with those educational establishments and work out where it's best spent to accommodate the increase in numbers.
Okay, Jim?
Well, yes, we're concerned about the medical side of it, because I do think we've got and I'm sure Councillor Doyle you can give me some feedback on this, but we have got a busy surgery already, and there's no provision for any additional surgeries.
Any other comments from the committee? No, can we move to the recommendations then?
I'll move the recommendation with all the conditions.
Is there a seconder? Seconder for that. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? Abstentions? 2 abstentions. So that recommendation is carried, okay? Thank you. We had a fair good debate on that one. Right. The next one we've got to consider is 2010-0828 Land and Ironstone, Lawley, Telford. This is on page 5 of the agenda of the report. We've got nobody.
No, I don't think anyone here.
No speakers on this one. No speakers. Yeah, there's no speakers on this one. Musical chairs. Right, who's doing this one then?
That will be myself again.
Right.
So the deed of variation as submitted seeks to vary the affordable housing element for phase 11 of the Lawley Sustainable Urban Extension from 25% to 10%. and to vary the form of affordable housing from a mix of social rent and shared ownership to discounted open market homes or first homes. This is the first of a pair of applications being presented before the committee today, connected with the Lawley Sustainable Urban Extension, which was originally granted outline permission in 2005. The second of these two applications considers the reserved matters for Phase 11, consisting of 600 dwellings. Before committee can consider the details of the reserved matters application, it is considered necessary to consider this application for a deed of variation to the Section 106 agreement to the outline application. The original Section 106 agreement sought 25% affordable housing across Lawley. For reasons of viability, the applicants are seeking to have this contribution reduced to 10% on Phase 11. By way of background, since the economic downturn of 2008, it has been necessary for the applicants to reduce the amount of affordable housing on phases approved since 2008. Phases 7 and 8 were approved with 15% affordable housing, and most recently phases 9 and 10 were approved with 12.5% affordable housing. Viability evidence has been presented by the applicants based on the market value of the land today, which proves the development is unviable. The appraisal also demonstrates that even without any affordable housing, Phase 11 still does not provide a financial return to the developer that meets the requirements of the NPPF. The Council has had the viability appraisal independently assessed by an external consultant who agrees that with the detailed viability information provided and supports the applicant's position. Nevertheless, the applicants have offered to provide 10% affordable housing in the form of discounted open market value homes. These would be offered with a 30% discount on the open market value. The applicants have suggested including provisions in the deed of variation to ensure that the proposed affordable units be kept affordable in perpetuity at 70% of their market value. Furthermore, the applicants have asked for flexibility to deliver this affordable housing as first homes if the government's first homes policy has been introduced before the affordable housing has been delivered on Phase 11. If this first homes policy has not been introduced in time, the applicants will deliver these dwellings as discounted market dwellings. The government has recently consulted on a new model for the provision of affordable housing which may come forward that would allow first-time buyers to purchase affordable housing at a discount of 30% of market value. The proposed scheme is named First Homes. However, the details of the scheme are not completely clear at this moment in time. The applicants have presented a draft deed of variation presented to the Council which ensures that the proposed 10% affordable housing will be secured as discounted open market affordable housing with an option to provide the 10% affordable housing as first homes under any future scheme should one come forward. In these circumstances, officers consider it's appropriate for members to accept the applicant's offer of 10% discounted open market homes. The 10% would equate to 60 dwellings across the site, all of which the applicants propose to be two-bedroom properties. The Council's housing team advised that it is unusual for an affordable housing scheme to consist of only one type and size of unit, and it would be preferable to replace some of the two beds with three-bed units. The housing team also advised that first homes or discounted open market value homes are less affordable and therefore less accessible. Nevertheless, discounted open market homes are a verified form of affordable housing as described within the NPPF, and given that the developers would justify providing zero affordable on the phase as a result of the viability, what is being proposed is considered far better than the provision of zero affordable units. Taking these factors into consideration, officers accept the applicant's justification that the Section 106 as approved is now unviable and needs to be reconsidered for the applicants as willing developers to bring this final parcel of Lawley forward. There are no other obligations to renegotiate, and as such, the only option is to consider the variation of the affordable housing. As a result of this, officers consider the benefits in terms of allowing the site to come forward will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the harm brought about by the reduction of affordable housing provision within Section 106 to 10%. And it's therefore recommended the application in respect of the variation to the 106 be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Right, open for debate. Peter Scott?
Yeah, it makes your heart bleed, doesn't it? That you can't make a site that size viable. I mean, it's bloody massive. Excuse me. But anyway, I'm hearing 25. Well, no, it might be nil, but we'll do 10. You know, it's like a bartering system. It's very disappointing. I think we'll all say that. It's very disappointing that, again, we're being held to ransom on affordable homes. I think we're in one of those positions, though, where we've got to take it, because what else? It's either this or nothing. But 10% really isn't good enough for a development that size, 600 houses. What are they doing? I mean, really, is it viable? Good God. Yeah, I'm disappointed, but I suppose I'll have to support it, because it's this or nothing. I don't think nothing's a good option.
Any further debate? Nigel Dugmore?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I'll reiterate that. Down to 10%, but it's better than the 5% from Ironbridge anyway. So there you go. So we've beaten Shropshire on that one. Yeah, I'll be quite interested to know how come Lawley is managing to book the national trend and having a property market downturn, because all the press that you read, property prices are going through the roof. So, you know, why, you know, same question as Councillor Scott, really. You know, why here? It doesn't make sense. I mean, this first homes principle sounds really, really good, and you know, so I agree with you. You know, it sounds much better, and is probably more affordable in certain respect. The only thing with reading up on it, though, sort of it goes on about the eligibility criteria, and I'd just be interested to know whether or not the discount can be applied in perpetuity, and how that will work in practice, because you know, sort of, you know, in 50 years' time, who's going to be around to sort of say, well, that house must be sold at a 30% discount? How's that going to be made to happen? I'd be interested to know what the best guess is for when this scheme's supposed to be coming in. And the only other thing is on 6.3.4 is to know whether or not Turley's, do they use Bridge House figures, or do they use their own and sort of do their own calculation and then see how it compares with the other companies? Because, you know, sort of you just wonder whether or not, because it seems bizarre that there's a property downturn just in Lawley, that whether or not these firms are actually doing it off, working it out from first principles, or whether or not they're using each other's figures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. Call it?
Yeah, thanks. I forgot actually, for both of these Lawley one, yeah, I'm the ward councillor as well, because his board is on mine, so I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. My question was, carrying on from Peter Scott, I remember there used to be some kind of a statutory obligation on the builders, 25 to 30%. You have to put these in. Why is it, you know, over the years, when this policy was introduced 20 years ago, we have come down and down from, you know, from 25 to 20, then a 10, then a 5, and 10. Is there some kind of obligation, statutory, Ian, or somebody can help me with that? The government stipulated that when that policy for affordable homes was introduced 20 years ago.
No, it does come through the planning policies that we have, but then we are subject to the position on viability. Anna and Peter and Nigel have said it, and I think I suppose we're all disappointed. the way it's going, but I'm afraid it is a position we're up against it when we're trying to argue against what is a independently assessed viability assessment. So no, there's nothing that trumps that as far as officers can see. I think I think someone said, we're hamstrung by the viability position.
I remember in 2003 I was on regular plans board, 3 till 7 or something. If it wasn't for 25%, we just sent everybody back again. Yeah, on it. But why has it over the years, it's come down on it? That's all. I'm just seeking clarification on that. And that's all it is.
So we have a policy within our local plan which sets out what we require, and that, yes, it has come down over the years in terms of from where it was back in the old Wrekin local plan to then what it is in the current Telford and Wrekin local plan within the urban area, and that's based on a viability appraisal generally when the local plan was adopted. However, site specifically, we need to take into account what is viable on the site. Please remember that this site was approved back in 2003 by Telford and Wrekin Council, and that at that time, the property market was on the boom, and then there was a big downfall. Okay, but at that point, the site was sold to the development consortium, who came to the table and bringing forward those first reserve matters applications. Okay, as that's happened, there was obviously the development crash, 2007, 2008, and I think not long after was when the consortium came back to the table and said this viability doesn't work because of what they've paid for the site. Now that's a signed up, sealed deal. That's nothing to do with us. That, however, has an impact in terms of what is viable. When they then move on to the site and then they start to uncover constraints that perhaps they weren't aware of beforehand, there's issues in terms of previous use on the site, there's issues in terms of ground levels. This site is significantly impacted by the ground levels and the earthworks that are on there, and because of we're making sure that those sites are stable, as well as carrying out the infrastructure that's required for both highways and drainage, etc., those are having implications in terms of then what the site can actually achieve, because those matters must be mitigated against. Okay, and it's that point in terms of when we're putting the design down that therefore they've gone, right, okay, this is how much it's going to cost us versus then what we can actually achieve it for.
And that's what the developers do now. That time we insisted on 25, and now they're saying, well, if it's more than 10% or whatever it is, we're not going to build it. So they always say that's one of the excuses that always comes in from the developers, doesn't it?
And that's why we therefore have this independently assessed. That information that has been submitted by the developers has then been independently assessed by our consultant. We've appointed this person and that company who have then gone through those figures. They have challenged figures, and there is backs and forth to make sure that they are happy and satisfied in terms of X, Y, and the development cost for, say, putting in that drainage infrastructure, etc., so that then they can work through it and understand what actually is that output. In this case, you have a development that comes forward here and says, actually, nothing's viable. We can't provide any affordable housing here. We have pushed back on that and sought to see how other ways and mechanisms that could come forward, recognising that there is Homes England grant funding which comes forward to support housing that's not controlled through Section 106 or conditions, because it's above and beyond. That's how they can seek additional funding. So that's one mechanism. And here, this is where we're looking at that discounted homes. Now that will be secured in perpetuity. It is a charge on the property through the Section 106 agreement.
Thanks very much for explaining that, Chair. Councillor Scott, I'm just as frustrated as you are. But all those years ago, we did it. Sorry,
we could debate. We could debate this all day long.
No, that's okay.
Councillor Lavery.
I have the same frustration as Councillor Scott and Dugmore, but listening to the reasoning being given just then suggests that people make an investment in land and then discover the risks afterwards and change the consequences further down the road. It's sort of buy the land, then discover what problems are, then not reduce the number of affordable housing in proportion to offset the unforeseen problems that we didn't look at in the first place. I mean, if I was running a business, to be honest with you, I would know what problems there were on that land before I bought it, and I'm damn sure they did too. So I don't accept the argument that you're putting forward, saying that they're finding out these problems now, nearly 20 years on, from when they bought the land, when even in that time it would have been a high level of investment to buy the land, and not knowing the risks involved. If they didn't know the risks involved, there could have been no houses built on that land, and there could have been coal mines and God knows what. They just don't do that. I don't believe it. I just think that they're moving the goalposts at every opportunity to increase the margins that they make.
Any further debate?
What my fellow councillors have said, I'd just like to reiterate that 10% seems very low. But is it normal to only be allowed 2-bedroom houses on affordable houses? Is that normal?
In terms of when we're looking at, we look for a mix. However, this is over and above what we would normally bring forward because the viability says nothing. Okay, so we've accepted that because it's better than nothing.
Okay, any further debate? Recommendation been moved, seconded. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. And that's unanimous. Thank you. I'm sure the officer noted the committee's disappointment in this lack of housing, affordable housing, no social housing. Okay, we better wait a minute now because we have other people coming in now to talk on this one, which is 2020 0047 Lawley Phase 11, and I've got 4 speakers down for it, so we need to get them into the room first. Hold on, see what's happening. One day we will get completely back to normal.
I'm just talking about the good old days, Charles. That's all.
They weren't as good as you think. Okay, we're moving on to 2020 0047 Lawley Phase 11. Mark, you want to introduce?
Thank you again, Jack. So the site lies to the west of Telford Town Centre and south of Martingale Way and the newly developed Lawley Centre. Phase 11 is bound to the north by a fence separating the site from the existing residential estate, Lawley Bank, which fronts onto the site. The eastern boundary is met by Station Road, which runs alongside the site. The southern boundary, again, is met by existing residential development, and the western boundary is adjacent to an arm of the Telford Steam Railway. The site lies within the red line application boundary for the Lawley Sustainable Urban Extension, previously used for mining works. There are no buildings currently on site, however there is a restricted byway which runs across the south-east of the site, named Lady Grove. A landscape feature known as Martingale Circus sits in the middle of the northern boundary of the application site and features a circle of trees planted to mark the millennium. This is a reserved matters application for Phase 11 of the Lawley Sustainable Urban Extension for the construction of 600 dwellings and formation of new accesses onto Concord to the south and into Phase 7 to the west. The application is pursuant to an outline planning permission dating back to 2005, latterly amended by the 2010 application. The Lawley Sustainable Urban Extension comprises 3,300 dwellings, employment, commercial and leisure facilities, a new primary school and associated recreational space and landscaping, and is being built out in phases over some 20 years, albeit not in the numerical phase order that we may expect. The outline consent for the whole urban extension having been approved in 2005. Phase 11 will provide an overall housing mix of 122 two-bed houses and apartments, 320 three-bed, 139 four-bed and 19 five-bed units. The most noticeable feature within the site is the significant change in land levels, which amounts to approximately 32 metres from the north to the south. Combined with this is the significant change in topography, where the land is significantly lower, where this meets with the access from the neighbouring Phase 7, where the applicants have been severely constrained as a result of the need to maintain appropriate highway gradients when accessing from Phase 7, whilst leaving Martingale Circus intact. I must stress to members that leaving Martingale Circus in situ has been as a direct result of public concerns for which the developers have addressed. As a result of the above factors, this has resulted in the need for the retaining slope and the proposed plateau, and also the need to fill the bowl shape within Phase 11. The layout of the site focuses on Martingale Circus with radial sites that create a legible layout connecting the pair of accesses, dovetailing with neighbouring developments either side. The design guide sets parameters for the retention of trees to the south of the site, and the developers have respected this with the proposed layout. There are a pair of protected trees on site, both of which have been incorporated. Either side of Martingale Circus sits an attenuation pond with retaining embankment, measuring approximately 3 to 3.5 metres in height. Members will have received a written update noting a statement regarding the proposed access over Ladygrove, concerns raised by Telford Steam Railway over the possible location of the playground and type of boundary treatment adjacent to the railway site, an additional 26 public representations and comments from the Coal Authority and Housing, an additional statement from Councillor Jane Greenaway. Additional conditions in respect of drainage and healthy spaces are also proposed. Further to the written update, it should be noted that a further 14 public representations have been received. However, these do not raise any material planning considerations above and beyond the considerations as outlined within the report to committee and written update. The developers and council have been in discussions with Telford Steam Railway about the potential to provide a play area within the land leased by the railway and accessed from Phase 11. Although these discussions were understood to have been agreed at the beginning of 2020, in the intervening period there has been a change of personnel at the Railway Trust, and this morning the local planning authority has been advised that they no longer wish to accommodate the play area. This has been accommodated in the additional planning conditions as requested and accepted by the Healthy Spaces officer. The Railway Trust have also raised the need for a specific type of safety barrier to prevent access to the site. Depending on the nature and specification of the barrier, it may be that this falls within the responsibility of the Railway Trust to provide a suitable enclosure that meets their particular needs, as the applicants have already proposed a site barrier to meet the relevant planning requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now have four speakers. Councillor J. York from the Parish Council, please. Councillor York, you've got 3 minutes.
Councillors, I speak on vehicular access, Ladygrove Lane ownership, its status and its use thereon, Others will speak on other issues. Ladygrove Lane, a restricted byway on the definitive map, thus afforded high protection. It should not be ploughed nor its elevation or route altered. By statute it has full usage of horse pedestrians, but also residents' motorised vehicles. Only they have unfettered access rights in their deeds. The Road Traffic Act 1988 defines a motor vehicle can be driven on a restricted byway by a resident or landowner or servant with a single, repeat, single private access directly abutting it. Other vehicle usage is an offence. This application shows 3 locations crossing Ladygrove to gain accesses to proposed homes. These would fail the access test and they do not each have access directly off the byway. Further, section 34(3) of the Act restricts this vehicular usage further than 15 yards from the byway. All estate users would thus commit an offence. The local highway authorities on their portal said, no plot construction commencement until requisite adoption agreements sealed for these crossing points. Reason, to ensure correct vehicular access rights in place and a legal process to supersede the existing restricted byway status of Ladygrove is secured. What legal process? A Section 38 adopted highway for the crossings may be appropriated. It does not address the lane status. The LA process is eagerly awaited. It appears lane status is to be altered to suit the proposal needs, officers casually implied. Our understanding is this a complex matter, a 257 Town and Country Planning Act hearing. Planning portal arises that this is sought before reserve matters is granted, as often successful objections, inquiries, reviews create costs like for to the embarrassment of the developer and the authority. Outline here occurred 15 years ago, outlining Ladygrove as a situation to be sorted. Why are we here now? Why was it not tackled earlier? Phase 11 will create some 1,500 traffic movements per day across Ladygrove. The lane's legal users and dangerous conflicts thus created have received little meaningful consideration. The estate's high flows will dissipate onto 3 surrounding roads. Traffic calming schemes proposed as mitigation measures qualify the authorities concerned. On the Station Road, east side of site, the plans show a single pedestrian exit from the estate onto it. But Station Road has no footway over its entire length, yet is the major car and pedestrian route to Lawley Centre. The responsible modern-day planning expects segregation for these at-risk pedestrians. I would say this would never and should never pass a stage 1, 2 or 3 safety audit. Please take note of our legitimate concerns, councillors, and refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor York. Councillor Jane Greenaway, the Ward Councillor. Hello Jane, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to demask first. Ladygrove Restricted Byway is on a definitive map. The status has remained unchanged and requires an order to allow the Spine Road to cross. No order has been issued or open for public consultation. This does not prevent grant of permission, but it would be required prior to development. Telford Steam Railway Lawley Station has lease land from Telford and Wrekin. It should not be under pressure to accommodate a play area within its site. The play provision should be within the development site. In 2020 saw 4 major flood events affecting residents from surface water runoff from site. One serious incident left 2 inches of clay silt covering car parks, gardens, pavements and roads in Horseshoe Paddock and Farriers Green, which took 3 whole days to clear. Flooding has been evident since 2012 on these low-lying homes. The silt attenuation ponds proposed are required to hold water back and mud runoff. The proposed management agreement is paramount. Any deviation will allow flooding to occur. It includes 1 monthly inspection and mechanical removal of debris every 12 months. The ponds will be installed immediately, but we have no assurance as to when a management company will be in place. We've continued to push for conditions to ensure residents are safeguarded throughout the build period from flooding. Full inspection and maintenance must be conditioned with immediate effect. The LVDG must comply until signed off to a management company. In addition to this, an engineered slope and Allen block wall will sit behind the ponds, which will provide a building platform. This is as high as the point of the top of the roof of homes in Martingale Way. Recent borehole investigations showed 34 out of 41 hit groundwater at 10 metres, and it rose a metre in 20 minutes. It also contains weak mudstone. This includes the area within the footprint of the structure. As a mine site, unrecorded mine entries cannot be ruled out. The significance of the retaining structure has potential for collapse from unconsolidated mine workings. Groundwater poses a risk to the structure and potential collapse as identified in the reports. These points require further inspections and ongoing monitoring. A high wall at risk above sediment ponds, unless closely monitored and inspected, is an accident waiting to happen. Residents of Martingale Way, Horseshoe Paddock and Farriers Green have put it with enough. They need to have confidence that this proposal will not impact their well-being or properties over the development period.
Thank you, Jane. Miss Carol Williams, please, member of the public. You've got 3 minutes, Carol.
Can I just raise a point of order with the Chair, please? The public consultation with this application expires at midnight on May the 19th. Is it legal to bring to committee at 2 p.m. on May the 19th?
Sorry, is it? What are you suggesting?
That the people who, there may be some submissions and objections submitted onto the site before the applications, the consultation has expired.
Want me to?
I'll ask the solicitor to deal with that one.
They're messy.
I can't make.
That's been addressed in one of the recommendations. I think it's the first recommendation, in the way that the power is being delegated to Val, I believe, to take into account any representations that are. Let's get the wording of the actual recommendation, just to give members comfort on that. 64. The detailed recommendation at 10.1 says, based on the conclusions, it's recommended that delegated authority be granted for the delivery management service delivery manager to grant reserved matters subject to no further representations being received during the consultation period to advertise. That notice has been served on a landowner within the application site, which raise material considerations that are, in the opinion of the development service delivery manager, after consultation with the chair, of such significance that the application should be reported back to planning committee for reconsideration or determination. So your point is addressed in 10.1a. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. You want to make some You've got 3 minutes now.
From the outset, this application has relied upon the wrong certificate. In 2005, outline plan was approved without notification of all consultees being issued with notice of ownership certificate. This was an invalid permission. Section 65 1919 Planning Act states, a local planning authority shall not entertain an application unless the requirements are met, and that any person who knowingly or recklessly issues a false or misleading certificate is guilty of an offence. Any application submitted without the certificate is invalid. The recent disputed issuing of Notice Certificate B to named alleged ex-landowner Derek Davies confirms there has been abject failure in adherence to lawful statutory procedures. Having spoken to Derek Davies, he informs me the consortium are paying his solicitor's fees. He has not seen any document that identifies his claim. Archived documents evidence the last person to own Lady Grove was Mr. Felton. His ownership was not relinquished in 1947 when Lawley Farm passed to Mr. Davies Sr. Land Registry confirmed no one can claim adverse possession over Lady Grove. 2010 application states there is no public database that accurately confirms owners of all properties occupied and constructed under the outline permission. Land Registry did exist in 2010. Residents were not consulted in 2010. All authorities ignored residents' expressed concerns about private land abuses in 2015, 18, 19, 20 and 21. The consortium deliberately misled about their right to cross Lady Grove. An email from Agent David Norris in 2018 asks about forms and ownership certificates, saying it would be useful to know where there is concern about land ownership. The authorities knew there was an issue and consistently failed to address it. The Telford Wrekin Council legal responses have been consistent in that ownership is not a planning matter. Lady Grove is a restricted byway protected by lawful legislation. Status cannot be overridden or superseded without statutory procedure and public consultation. There is no get-out clause. English Partnerships produced a document in 2003 noting Lady Grove as critical to future development plans. Authorities have failed to scrutinise subsequent applications. Homes England were not transparent when marketing Lawley Common to developers. For decades, Lady Grove residents have been under siege, forced to protect their families and defend their properties from a regime fuelled by profit and contempt for the ordinary person. Lady Grove is not and has never been an irrelevant pothole dirt lane. It holds significant historical relevance. Originally a trodden grass path, it became a wooden rail track used for transporting minerals off Lawley Common to Coalbrook Dale during the 18th century. Lady Grove is our home. We live here. We're proud to share our lane with indigenous and new communities, galvanised by centuries of shared poverty, hope, grief, joy and prosperity. Geo-risk documents states mature homes within the high wall are at risk of structural damage. This has already proven to be the case. Homeowners have contacted council and developers with concerns about dislodged brickwork causing structural instability. They met with derision. Also in the GRS document, it states it should be strongly noted
Carol,
that...
can you wind up now, please?
Sorry.
Can you start and wind up? You've had your 3 minutes.
Okay.
Plus.
Thank you.
If you want to make a statement, concluding statement, do so to the committee.
It's only 2 lines.
Okay.
The GRS document also states it should be strongly noted that the above assessment does not include an assessment of collapsed settlement, which is a potential risk on this site due to the depth of made ground. An assessment of the collapsed settlement should be made by the principal designer as part of the site wider assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
Chair, can the microphone be dealt with, please?
The microphones are for the recording, not for the room.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
so, oh, wow. That's what I've got here. Okay.
Okay. Chris Wilson, please, the applicant's agent. You've got 3 minutes, Chris.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present. My name is Chris Wilson. I'm the Master Planner of the project. I've been involved in Lawley about 15 years. I've been involved in the design and design codes and have been advising on design matters throughout that period. So on behalf of the Developer Consortium, so we welcome the Office's recommendation. Through this Phase 11 Reserve Matters application, we've responded as positively to the matters and concerns and the constraints given on this site. And we've addressed this through a substantial amount of technical work commensurate to the scale of development and this type of application. In relation to the original design vision for the Lawley development, Phase 11 forms the 5th and final neighbourhood called Lawley Bank. And this site character is formed by this distinctive bowl shape with far-reaching views to the Wrekin. The landform has required extensive remodelling to enable delivery of the infrastructure and the platforms by which the 600 homes will be delivered. The result will create a well-planned, an attractive and a safe residential environment. New affordable homes are being provided and secured through this deed of variation to the 106. Through this discussion with the local authority, it has been agreed that 10% of the new homes will be affordable. So the issues of drainage and flood risk, we have technical solutions. On-site surface water storage will be through 2 substantial attenuation areas to the north of the site, and there will be controlled release from these 2 to surface water sewers, one located in Huntington Drive and the other in Martingale Way. Care has also been taken in respect of wider engineering associated with the site's development. So these drainage basins will sit at the northern edge of an engineered retaining wall, and both the structural And importantly, the aesthetic of this green slope will form part of the site's wider landscape strategy. On public open space and landscape provision, we are providing plentiful and carefully sited areas of open space, retaining existing tree belts and pockets that forming squares throughout the housing form. Lawley Circus, a key and existing open space feature, we have endeavoured to ensure this is delivered and respected and will be retained, and links will be provided to this area from the wider master plan. In regards to Lady Grove footpath, what we can say is that part of the application process we have served notice to the executor and in respect of this land to which no objection has been received. So we've worked closely with officers over this very long project period. It's been a very difficult piece of the site to deliver, and the consortium of developers and Homes England have been kept liaising with residents through the forums where possible. So we trust you will consider that this development is worthy of your support, and through your decision enable a final concluding matters of detail brought forward to you today.
Right. Thank you, Chris. Mark, do you want to come back?
Yes, please, Chair. If I just run through some planning matters and then pass on to both the highway engineer and drainage engineer in conjunction with legal officer to kind of wrap up any more specific matters. So approximately 194 public representations have been received as part of the cumulative public consultation, raising concerns in respect of, albeit not limited to, the impact on trees and landscape, highways and transport, amenity, drainage, land stability, design and layout, and the built heritage and archaeology alongside ecology and affordable housing. Technical consultees, including highways, drainage, trees and ecology and a healthy space, are supportive of the development subject to appropriate conditions as outlined within the original committee report and written update. Matters in respect of affordable housing have been addressed within the previous deed of variation application and remain relevant to the consideration of the current application. The principle of housing development on this phase has already been approved and established by the grant of outline consent for the Lawley Sustainable Urban Extension and the acceptance that there would be a series of reserved matters applications as the development was being built over phases over the coming years. The principle of residential development is therefore accepted. Phase 11 has in principle received planning consent under the wider Lawley Urban Extension outline consent, and therefore the general highway considerations were made at that point, including all the requisite off-site traffic impact modelling, and this cannot now be revisited, and therefore this reserved matters application is assessed in highways term against that context already set. The Lawley Design Code has always clearly identified the access strategy, street layout and hierarchy for Phase 11, and this application is in keeping with that detail. The development provides for the provision of 1,404 car parking spaces, which is in excess of 40 spaces when benchmarked against the Council's parking standards. It is understood that the ownership of Lady Grove is on the path to resolution, in that the landowner has been found and the sale of the 3 crossing points over Lady Grove and all the associated access rights over it are currently being resolved. In any case, land ownership is not a material consideration in the determination of this application and shall remain a civil matter. The Phase 11 proposals include a pair of attenuation basins at the bottom, the northwestern end of the site. The overall drainage scheme proposed for Phase 11 is expected to improve the existing problems with surface runoff and existing flood risk to properties in and around the area of Martingale Way, subject to the local planning authority receiving revised information and subject to conditions securing detailed design, revised phasing plan and appropriate triggers for phasing the delivery of the intermediate and permanent drainage schemes. Turning to the issue of design, the Lawley Design Code and Addendum were prepared to provide additional detailed guidance to the development framework and set out a vision for the development to be built in a number of phases over the identified 20-year period. It should be noted that the design code and addendum are mandatory and comprise 4 residential neighbourhoods, namely Newdale Valley, Newdale Village, Lawley Bank and Newdale, together with a new local centre provided at its heart. Phase 11 comprises Lawley Bank neighbourhood. It should be noted that during the course of the application, the applicants have identified the landowner of Ladygrove and consequently submitted Certificate B to reflect this land ownership. This is in accordance with correct planning process, and the local planning authority have reconsulted on this in accordance with its statutory duties. To conclude, the principle of residential development has been established on this via a pair of previous outline consents, as have the principle of access, street hierarchy and connectivity. The purpose of the current application is to approve the reserved matters in respect of appearance, scale, layout, access and landscaping. Paragraph 8.3.4 refers to the comments of the Council's geotechnical specialist regarding the design and structure of the retaining slope. I can advise members that the design of the wall has been reviewed in light of further ground investigations and is considered suitable. Further technical details regarding the engineering method of the slope can be secured by planning condition, and it would be appropriate to do so. The development is considered acceptable in terms of impact upon amenity for existing residents, highways, drainage and flood risk, geotechs and land stability, heritage, archaeology, arboriculture and landscaping, and would contribute 600 dwellings towards the borough's housing supply. The detailed design and layout contributes in part towards the objectives of the Lawley design codes and creating a neighbourhood at Lawley Bank. The application is proposing 10% affordable housing through the Section 106. This has been dealt with through the deed of variation previous. Members are asked to note the applicants have liaised with the public throughout the application process through regular meetings and correspondence, maintaining an above average level of communication with the wider community, resident groups and individuals. The applicants have accommodated the public desire for Martingale Circus to be circle to be retained exactly as it is. The retention of belt to the of trees to the south of the site, off-site highway works. All these aspects have been provided despite contributing to the non-viability of the scheme. Despite this, the applicants are still proposing 10% affordable housing, as discussed previously. The applicants have also volunteered to reduce their approved construction working hours on site in response to residents' concerns, comments, as referred to within paragraph 8.8.2. Taking all matters into account, the local planning authority considers that when the advantages and disadvantages of the scheme are weighed against each other, the benefits outweigh the detriments, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. The recommendation being to grant reserved matters subject to conditions and informatives as outlined within the original committee report and the written update previously circulated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Over to the committee to debate.
Wasn't I going to say so?
Sorry?
I think some officers were going to make some comments just before the debate.
Just in highways terms, I'll just echo what Mark said earlier, is that the highway principles for this in general were set on the original outline application. So any discussion over what vehicles are doing, where they're going, how many vehicles are generated, that has all been addressed at the outline stage. The access strategy that is proposed for phase 11 is as per the design code, and the street hierarchy as well is as per the design code. The street layout that you see there is actually very, very similar to what is in the design code document. When it comes to the legal matters regarding the Ladygrove situation, I think that Ian is going to explain that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. Ian?
Yes, members.
Did you know?
Oh, well, this morning was different in the briefing.
Just to pick up on some of the Ladygrove residents' concerns and Mr York's concerns that have been put forward. The question regarding ownership of the land over which Ladygrove runs That's been questioned. However, the developer, as we know now, has confirmed that an owner has been identified. The council does not need to look behind this. It's not part of the LPA's role to question what the developer comes forward with by way of ownership details. When processing planning applications, the local planning authorities don't need to double check what applicants say about land ownership. It's not part of its role. But if the developer hasn't identified the correct landowner, that might cause problems for the developer down the line. But it's not an issue which prevents the council determining this planning application, which is essentially what Mark said when he describes the land ownership issues as a private matter. Now, the residents have raised concerns about their private rights along Lady Grove. Again, this is something for the developer to sort out with the residents who are concerned that the proposals might impact on their private rights. This is what I picked up. But again, that's not an issue which prevents this committee determining this planning application at this time. There's concern about the impact on the restricted byway which runs along it's Lady Grove, which is a restricted byway. It's the title of the route. As Mr. York has said, the restricted byway is a public right-of-way over which the public have a right as pedestrians, horse riders, cyclists, and also in horses and carts. It's not what's prohibited is use in motorised vehicles. That's what you can't do along a restricted byway. The developer does not propose, however, to remove the restricted byway rights along Lady Grove. The restricted byway rights along Lady Grove will remain. There will be 3 points where the restricted byway is to be crossed by estate roads, and those can be seen on the plans. And over those crossing points there will be use by motorised vehicles. However, what's important is to appreciate that the public will not be prevented from using the restricted byway on foot, horse, bicycle, horse and cart, etc. The design of the crossing points will preserve the ongoing use as restricted byway. No rights, those rights to use on foot, horseback, bicycle, horse and cart, those rights won't be lost just because of the creation of the crossing points. The design conditions around the crossing points will secure and preserve the use of the restricted byway rights so that people can cross over the vehicular highway. A vehicular route is of higher status. It encompasses all those lower rights that fall beneath it. So the restricted byway will coexist with the vehicular rights which the landowner is going to be permitting over the crossing points. And thinking further ahead, in due course, when the estate roads are all built, in due course further they'll be adopted and they'll be permanently dedicated by the owner as vehicular highways if the application goes ahead as vehicular highways, and still the restricted byway Lady Grove will be usable again with the properly designed crossing points. This will be a permanent arrangement to enable continued use of the restricted byway rights over Lady Grove. And just to pick up on Mr. York's point, he raised a point about Section 34 of the Road Traffic Act and that it creates an offence. Well, it does create an offence for driving over areas that aren't roads, but it's only an offence if you drive over those areas without lawful authority. Now, in this case, the landowner has been identified, and a landowner can give lawful authority for motorised vehicles to travel over restricted byways. That's the position of the council. And as we say, ultimately they'll be dedicated, and in due course, if everything goes according to the developer's plans, they'll be adopted as all-purpose highways with these facilities for people to cross over the crossing points and still continue to use Lady Grove. That's it.
Thank you, Ian. Drainage.
Yeah, thank you. Further to what Mark said, we have received a phasing plan from the developer which sets out how the ponds are going to be connected. So it sets out the thresholds for that as well, and it means the first pond on the west will be constructed at the commencement of works to manage sediment and the flow rate into the Martingale Way system. The threshold for that being connected to the public sewer, which is its final outfall and the intended outfall for this site under the wider Lawley Master Plan, is as soon as the first permanent hard standing within that drainage catchment is installed. So those thresholds have been set out. I mean, once we've got permanent runoff areas built on this site, that water should be going down into the public sewer through Martingale Way, not into the watercourse down Horseshoe Paddock. The Suds ponds have been designed for the 1 in 100 plus climate change event, which is a betterment on the original master plan discharge rates. And those are the two ponds to deal with the two different sides of the site. We have received a full model for the site, technically reviewed it, and that has been acceptable. We are still awaiting full exceedance plans, although we've had the initial master plans for those, and we've requested further conditions regards to the maintenance of the systems, because the requirements for SUDS maintenance have changed since the original application, and we've also requested conditions to protect the drainage system serving Lady Grove as well.
Okay. Any other comments from the officers? No? Open debate then. Councillor Houghton.
Yeah, just, you know, sticking with the Lady Grove Association and all the object. I don't think Ian sort of, what about the National Coal Board said, their statement that it will never be a safe place to build and it will be always be polluted. Can you, did you go over that, Ian, or somebody's going to go over it? There's a statement in here which says that National Coal Board states that land will never be safe for development because it's polluted. Does anybody know that? This is page 21. Well, the Lady Grove residence object. It's right at the end there. And also, I think local council MPs objected as well. On the, you know, the Coal Board Authority objected on 12th of February 2020. Can somebody address that? Where does that come from?
In terms of the latest information presented from both the Coal Authority and the Council's geotechs is that they are satisfied with the development as submitted. There has been kind of continued dialogue through the course of the application. Indeed, I believe there's something circulated within the written update within paragraph 3.5 that talks about the additional information having been submitted to demonstrate that the risks posed by past coal mining authority are being properly investigated and addressed, and therefore raise no objections subject to further investigatory, remedial and mitigation measures. So through the technical expertise, I suppose, we have that kind of assurance.
You're saying they might have said it, but they changed their mind.
Yes, the latest information is that they raised no objection.
So they did object, and they did make the statement that it will never be the safe, but they have, now they have
and then
changed
that further information has been submitted, and this is their
thanks, Charles.
Okay.
It says here also, the mine shafts may be filled with contaminated waste. What sort of contaminated waste are we on about?
In terms of is it something? No. I don't know exactly what kind of the contaminated waste is in terms of the kind of boreholes and mine shafts, but that would come in terms of the proposed mitigation and remediation works involved in that would kind of address any contamination issues. I just don't necessarily know what type of contamination.
Just wouldn't it be harmful to people who live there?
But there's kind of certain elements through kind of the process. We want to ensure that any housing kind of built is safe, and there's kind of through kind of building regulations and control and other measures, we can kind of ensure that there is kind of no pollutants or contaminants, which would kind of affect resident safety. Furthermore, it is also just that they are just claims made by local residents, so it would come under the further exploratory work. There hasn't been any evidence submitted by residents to either support or substantiate those claims as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just one
Okay,
quick
so
question
Scott?
about electrical charging points. Have you been considered?
In terms of the status of the application, because it all still reverts back to the outline permission, which was 2005. In terms of the reference to electrical vehicle charging point, that's a kind of more recent addition. So it's not something that's proposed as part of the current application.
Strange, because we are to believe that it is the future, which it probably is. You would have thought it would have been paramount with everything that comes forward now. It's strange that it isn't. Just one other quick question. The MP suggests this has been running for 50 years, this application. Is that right?
No.
I would have thought so, but that's what it says. So it's not been, this application has not been, as you say.
The outline permission was submitted 2004 with a resolution the year after, with a subsequent amendment to that in 2010. I don't know, it was a comment made.
Yeah, this application has been under consideration for almost 50 years. Sounded weird, but just wanted to confirm
it's literally just reiterating the points which raised.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Just one if I could.
Yes.
Maybe. Lady Grove again. You know these 3 crossing points that everybody's talking about? Will it be the pedestrians giving way to the cars that are zooming across the crossings, or the cars giving way to the pedestrians that currently use it as a walkway? Because if the cars have the right of way, then it's no longer a straightforward walkway for the pedestrians, is it?
Yeah, the specific detail of those crossing points is yet to be agreed, but it's expected that those crossing points, it would be identified as there's a Lady Grove corridor through, and they could be raised, they could be finished in a different surface treatment. So if anybody using the 3 access points does come across somebody walking on a horse or something like that across that section, then it'd be quite clear that they probably do have priority. And that's very much how estates are designed nowadays with these 20-mile-an-hour design speeds, is that it's to give priority to pedestrians, people on their bikes, and the cars are almost secondary. And I can't see why that sort of philosophy can't be relayed in terms of these crossing points as well.
The other area, the railway, I'm not sure, but I think it's a non-profit making sort of organisation. We're saying that we're expecting them to develop play areas and put fencing up and God knows what. And we've got a project here that's into the millions of pounds, and you know, one wonders why that can't be absorbed into the project rather than be dumped onto a non-profit making sort of organisation.
In terms of the responsibility of the developers, it's to kind of to deliver on the scheme, but and kind of what's within the boundary of the site. It's unclear as to the extent to which it kind of crosses over into land which is the responsibility of Telford.
I tend to hear what you say from the spirit of the situation. We're talking about a low turnover non-profit making organisation having to dip its hands in the pocket as a consequence of a multi-million-pound project. I would have thought that the project people could afford a few fences and a bit of a play area.
The developers have, through the submission, made provision for an access. So if can we go to the location plan? So to the west of the site, that's where the phase 7 accesses into the site. Hopefully you can kind of see a road just abutting a red line. And then the area to the south of that is kind of where the railway terminates. The developers have kind of provided kind of an area to access that parcel of land. So they've already made kind of provision for that, and they have made provision for kind of other works in terms of filling in an existing ditch close along the boundary as well. So they are making provision to make enhancements to Telford Steam Railway. So I wouldn't say they're not providing anything. They are providing some enhancements to the Telford Steam Railway.
Didn't you say in your delivery that they didn't see the fencing being their responsibility and it was the railway's responsibility?
In terms of the railway, is seeking an enhanced boundary treatment above and beyond what may ordinarily be expected. So it's that kind of above and beyond which they, I think, kind of raise the concern. The Telford Steam Railway is saying that the fencing essentially needs to be health and safety compliant to the railway needs, but there is no requirement on the developers to provide it. So this is standard.
Okay, Jim? Any other comments? No, well, the recommendation is before us then.
Well,
It's been moved by Pitcott.
I'll move the recommendation with all the, but there again, I didn't want to talk about, affordable and 10%, but that's fine, Charles.
Oh, yeah,
I'm not going to do
no,
it. But I'll move the recommendation with all the conditions attached to it on page, where was it, right at the end there. I've just been reading it. Even the time scale is open, a limited time limit to reserve matter. Is that to be decided afterward? Because on the first one, it was 3 years.
In terms of, I believe it is for 3 years from the grant of this reserve
It's
matter.
always 3 years. Yeah.
Oh, no. It used to be 5 one time, it's 3 now. Okay, recommendation moved and seconded. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's unanimous. So the recommendation is there. Thank you. We'll move on to the next one then in a few minutes if we get the people in.
Yes.
Years. Move on to the next one, which is TWC 2020-1087, the site at Fernley, Barrack Lane, Lilleshall. We had a site visit on this one this morning, so Andy, you want to present?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a full application for the erection of 2 dwellings and the conversion of the existing bungalow into 2 bungalows. The proposal relates to the semi-detached bungalow and garden of Fernley on Barrack Lane, Lilleshall. As Chair said, members visited the site this afternoon and were able to assess the site, the proposal and its surroundings. The proposal provides 4 parking spaces for the 4-bedroom houses and 2 spaces for the 2-bedroom bungalows. That's in line with the local plan parking standards. Officers are proposing an amendment to the recommendation to add conditions in respect of protective fencing around the existing trees. That's condition B130. A condition requiring a site environmental management plan that will cover things such as construction times and the parking of construction vehicles, and a condition to require the implementation of the approved drainage details, which are soakways for surface water and mains foul sewage prior to the occupation of the new properties. On that basis, officer recommendation is for approval. Back to you, thank you, Chair.
Right, we have 4 speakers. First one is Councillor Andrew Eade, the Ward Councillor. Welcome, Andrew. You've got 3 minutes.
That's very kind of you, Charles. Thank you. The principle of infill in Lilleshall is fully accepted, and appropriate development of the Barrack Lane site isn't an issue. What is an issue and of great concern is the scale and mass of the proposed development and the impact it will have on neighbouring properties and the local community. It's accepted by the planning officer at 8.11 that the proposed properties are of a large scale, while our local plan policy BE1 states that developments should respect and respond positively to its context and does not adversely impact on neighbouring properties, both of which in this case are bungalows. Another key concern is undoubtedly the impact on what is a surprisingly busy and very narrow lane, which also provides pedestrian access to the Hutchison Way. As members will appreciate from their site visit, and I hope it didn't rain, extra vehicles and parking for 3 additional homes will have a huge impact, as the current proposals do not comply with policy CO13 on parking, loading and turning. A failure also acknowledged by the planning officer at paragraph 8.27. Also, the assertion that the visibility display can be achieved for access and egress only if frontage boundaries are no taller than 800 mil is simply not enforceable. Policies C3 and C5 of our local plan clearly state that development will be supported where it ensures appropriate and safe access and sufficient parking can be achieved. Simply put, the buildings are too close to the road and do not provide enough spaces to accommodate residents' parking, let alone delivery vehicles or visitors. Indeed, there are no parking spaces for 100 metres either side of the site. We've commissioned our own tracking exercise, which shows that vehicles cannot access or leave that site in one manoeuvre. For instance, cars reversing out of plots 2 and 3 will clip the car next to it. Also, plots 1, 2 and 3 are only accessible by crossing the neighbouring boundary. However, the biggest impact of all is the movement of extremely large farm machinery and delivery vehicles which service a working farm directly opposite the development site. And I don't believe that we can in all conscience award planning permission to a development which may effectively strangle an existing and established business. However, I want to stress a willingness to work with the applicant to resolve all of the aforementioned problems, plus all other associated issues which directly affect this development, should the committee be minded to defer the application to facilitate further discussions. Finally, we have requested additional conditions are opposed by this committee, and I will leave that to officers to respond and detail those now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I call Councillor Shaw, please, D. Shaw, from the Parish Council? Councillor Shaw, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Firstly, I wish to point out that the Parish Council would support the proposals, or any proposal that meets the policies of the Lilleshall Parish Neighbourhood Plan, developed with the guidance of Telford and Wrekin planning officers and adopted by the Borough Council in December 2018. Our objections to this proposal are founded on its failure to meet particular requirements of housing and development policies of our shared plan. In this case, the application fails to meet the requirements of two key policies. Policy Dev 1, infill housing in Lilleshall Village, specifies the proposals contribute positive and local positivity to the local character and distinctiveness. This proposal does not contribute positively, and it does in fact introduce a number of detrimental factors to the local area. The development is not consistent with the surrounding properties and area, and certainly does not contribute to the local village character. Policy Dev 2, Design of Residential Infill Development, specifies, amongst others, the development must ensure appropriate and safe access can be achieved. Contrary to this requirement, the proposal introduces increased limitations and risk to safe access in Barrack Lane. As pointed out in written objections, and can be seen by inspection of the application drawings, the design should be consistent with prevailing scale, density and materials that affect the local distinctive character. As pointed out in written objections, and can be seen by inspection of the drawings, the house designs are totally out of character, and therefore the scheme does not meet with these criteria. It does not. The development should not impact adversely on the amenity of neighbouring properties. The number and content of objections submitted by neighbouring residents shows that the impact would be adverse. The infill development should provide adequate off-street parking to relieve congestion, and has already been mentioned before, in narrow local access roads. Whilst the scheme drawings show possible adequate parking for the new residents, it does not demonstrate the adequate provision of visiting vehicles such as deliveries and overnight stays. They must park in the narrow lane, obstructing traffic. Our neighbourhood plan policies are not simply produced for the guidance of our parish council. The policies are adopted and implemented by the Borough Council. Therefore, I would request that in this case the Planning Committee is mindful to reject the application. However, should the committee be mindful to reject or defer, the Parish Council would still be happy to work in collaboration with the applicants, residents groups and planning officers in order to produce a proposal as a benefit to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Philip Hill, please, member of the public. Philip, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Philip Hill, and in partnership with my wife Wendy, we run Newhouse Farm, which is traded for at least 100 years. Our access road enters Barrack Lane just a few metres north of the proposed development. We're not against the site being developed and look forward to welcoming new families into our community. But these plans are not safe. This plot is being divided into too many properties, too close to a narrow, privately owned road, creating a restricted parking area with poor visibility. The open frontage invites the potential for parking half on, half off the road, and so restricting or blocking it. The narrowness of the road and the need to negotiate 90-degree turn into tight parking spaces will make manoeuvring difficult. It will be difficult to manoeuvre safely onto the road, as the driver will be unsighted whether reversing or drawing out. Large homes tend to attract large cars, and it would appear that in this instance it's impossible to sensibly park the vehicle and be able to unload the boot without either the person standing on the edge of the road or in it, or with the front of the car sticking into the road. Closely parked cars will hide a child, so a passing motorist will have little chance of avoiding a collision if that child runs into the road. The open frontage is out of character for this part of the village. The frontages are small, leading to non-existent safety margins. In other areas of the village with open frontages like Limekill Lane or Sylvan Close, the houses are set well back. There's a footpath between the property and the road. There's space, visibility, light is good. In this proposal, Fernley, the road is narrow, and cramped. The houses close to the road, visibility is poor. Because of the wood on one side and potentially multi-storey houses on the other, there will be many days, especially in the winter, when the light is poor. All the other properties on this part of Barrack Lane have a wall or a hedge between them and the road. But specifically regarding our business, to operate efficiently, our business requires the current easy access for large lorries and agricultural vehicles, as seen as the photographs which you might have seen, to be maintained at all times. For the reasons mentioned, this planning proposal will degrade this facility. Easy access is particularly required at harvest time, when large farm tractors and trailers need to move in a timely and efficient manner. But more importantly, health and safety is a big issue in agriculture. It's a deadly industry. We are acutely aware of and try to anticipate and avoid dangerous situations. The large properties proposed are family homes. Once out of the front door, there's no protection, no physical or psychological barrier to stop children or pets wandering onto the road. Today's tractors are large, often pulling a trailer or a tanker, and for the driver at close quarters there are many blind spots. There isn't room to pass an adult pedestrian safely on this road at this moment in time. These vehicles will just be a couple of feet away from those cars parked on the site. A driver may not see a child stepping into his path. To approve these plans set out as they are, knowing that large farm vehicles and heavy lorries operate close, is not just dangerous, it's potentially lethal. These plans are not safe and they need radically revising. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Andy Williams, please, the applicant's agent. Andy, you've got 3 minutes.
The proposals represent limited infill within the framework of the village, which contains a variety of single, 1.5 and 2-storey height properties. The officer responds to a pre-application inquiry confirmed that the conversion of the existing large bungalow into 2 smaller bungalows with associated parking is acceptable, and that the site is also capable of accommodating 2 detached houses to the side, extending at a split level to accommodate the unusual site topography, which you'll have seen from your site visit today, slopes down sharply from a shallow plateau on the frontage, with the properties on higher ground either side. Following submission, your officers requested a number of modifications which were agreed to. The front elevations to Barrack Lane are of a form and scale consistent with Duke of Sutherland properties, although offering a more contemporary design and appearance. The front elevations of plots 1 and 2 are effectively 1.5-storey height, and as the report confirms, not much higher than the adjacent dwellings. Cross and long section drawings have been provided to show the relative heights and relationships between the existing and new properties, which your officers have confirmed is acceptable. A generous gap of 3 metres will be maintained between plot 1 and Meadowcroft, which has a blank side wall except for a high level and a secondary window, both of which are opaque glazed. In addition, the 2 properties will be separated by an existing conifer screen and boundary wall, both of which will remain unaffected. A gap of nearly 4 metres will also be provided between plot 2 and the existing plot 3 bungalow. The scheme provides for ample parking in front in accordance with the council standards, but if necessary there is scope to set plots 1 and 2 back a couple of feet to provide even more generous on-plot parking spaces. Tracking has also been provided to demonstrate that the spaces will be perfectly accessible to and from the lane. The parking in front of the existing Fern Lee, which can be installed as permitted development, also meets the council standards. The new drive openings will also provide a useful refuge for pedestrians from occasional passing vehicles, which travel at slow speed in this location. Your highways team have no objections to the application. A drainage strategy has been submitted along with additional details that have satisfied your drainage officer, who has no objections. Although not a planning matter, my client's legal title provides all the necessary rights of access and connection to services in Barrack Lane. The proposals are policy compliant and all reasonable planning concerns have been addressed, and the appropriate revisions have been provided as requested. We trust that committee will therefore support its officer's recommendation to approve, and as I've said, my client would potentially be prepared to set the buildings back another 3 feet, say, if that helped assuage any local concerns, because my client has the same general concerns. He wants to provide a frontage with decent space. So there's no conflict there really, but that would be a matter we could sort out with officers if members were minded to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Do you want to come back, Andy?
No, I'm right for the... sorry, Chair. Yes.
Well, there's a speaker opinion.
Sorry, Chair. Get that out of practice. Yeah, so objections have been received, as we've just heard. They primarily relate to the development being out of keeping and having a detrimental impact on neighbouring amenity. Officers have been and are sensitive to the impact and duly negotiated the scale and design, which has been reduced and revised. As we saw on site this morning, there was a dotted or a dashed line showing the previous location of the property. And now it's got a hip roof plot 1, which is next to Meadowcroft, amongst some other changes. The depth of the dwellings has been reduced in line with the rear of Meadowcroft. Officers do acknowledge that the properties either side are bungalows. However, as members saw on site this morning, there are 2-storey properties in the not too distant boundary, and as we saw from the street scene drawings this morning, I think the officers' view is that the 2-storey fit in well and respect the character of Barrack Lane. In respect of highways, I've obviously got professional colleagues here, but just briefly, tracking exercise has been demonstrated, has demonstrated that the vehicles can access and egress, although I respect what Councillor Eade said. And whilst we are sensitive to it, we don't consider the additional traffic from 3 dwellings would result in an unacceptable or unsafe impact on the highway. And then in respect to deliveries, this is a similar situation to some of the other properties on Barrack Lane where they don't have parking for delivery vehicles, such as the bungalows to the left. Accordingly, officer's recommendation is for approval, subject to the additional conditions, the 3 additional conditions that I mentioned before. And I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Right. Highways, do you want to make a comment?
Nothing further really to add. I can just respond to any questions when they pop up.
Thank you. Councillor Houghton.
Yes, Andrew. Andrew Eade said something about there's a working farm across the road, which ins and out they would be obstructed. Is that a factor as well, or does that make any difference to our decision? The farm across the road, they have to take their tractors in and out, and the fact that this development is so close to the road, and also there is going in and out, the visibility on that. That's what I'm concerned about. Can you sort of talk about that for me?
I can pick up on that. So in terms of there being an obstruction to that, the applicant's provided parking that exceeds the local plan parking standards. So I mean, we've got I think a total of 12 spaces shown there, and the rural parking standards would dictate 10. So that's in excess of that, and as we know, that includes visitor parking to an extent. They're included in the kind of decimal points in the.
Yeah. And the fact that it is an unadopted road, isn't it? It's got potholes and everything in it.
It's a private road along that length.
So, what's the difference? If it had been adopted, an application comes in, it's not adopted, application comes in. What is the difference?
So our remit is to look at, obviously, assess the impact on the adopted highway. So in terms of issues manifesting themselves on the private road, we're obviously sensitive to that, but we need to be looking at whether the proposals will have be of detriment to the operation of the highway.
Yeah,
that's the difference here.
And the fact that it's contrary to the policy of the Lillishire Borough Council development. Have they got a development plan? Is it contrary to their?
Not that I'm aware of. It's not something I'm familiar with.
It says on their statutory, the objection chairs. If they have a plans, the policies.
Was that in respect of highways, Council?
Well, it said proposal contrary to the number of policies within the Lillishire neighbourhood development plan.
Oh yes,
Do they have a development plan, the Lillishall Council?
Yes, it was made in 2018. So the policies, I think Councillor Shaw referenced quite a few of them. There was Dev 1, which relates to infill and the suitability of it. There's one D1, which is sympathetic design. Dev 2 relates to the retention of important features to local areas such as stone walls, trees, hedgerows, green spaces. And then the highways one is Dev 2D. That outlines that development will be supported where it ensures appropriate and safe access and sufficient parking can be achieved. So we've in our report we've gone through it and we form a different opinion. We don't think that it's contrary to the Lillishall local plan.
But the Lillishall Council objected it on their local development plan.
Yes.
But we can disagree with that. Is that what you're saying, Andrew?
Well, I suppose the thing about planning policy is that it can be interpreted more than one way. So I think that's what it boils down to, the interpretation of the policies.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, thank you. I think this application is one of those where you really see the benefit of a site visit. On paper, it does make you think, what's it like? But when you go there and it's explained, I found it rather a clever design and quite in keeping, actually. I mean, Lillishall has got a lot of houses that are not the same. I would like to think that we could take up the applicant's agent's offer of more depth in the parking spaces. I think that would help. And I'd like to see that as a condition, that as much space as possible is put there. Well, I really cannot see a reason to reject this, because it's rather a clever design, and I think the location is also appropriate. So I would support it, assuming we can have extra space on those parking spaces, please.
Yes, Dougmore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, unfortunately I couldn't make the site visit, but anyway, I have been past it in the past, so I do know what it looks like. Just being intrigued, a couple of questions. On 8.11, how much has the proposed depth of the dwellings actually been reduced by? And on 8.21, and how much has the distance separation been increased by? And yes, the concerns over the turning the space to turn cars on the drive. I mean, the median turning circle for an average car is about 10.5 metres. I've found out by doing a bit of investigation. So, you know, does the drive allow for that? And if not, wouldn't a simpler solution would be just to move the dwellings further back onto the plot to give sufficient space to move it? I mean, I'm glad that there's you know, one of my major concerns was construction management plan, but glad to see that that's being included, and also with the drainage details and the protective fencing. But I'd just like to have a couple of questions answered, please.
Yeah, of course. If Chloe would be kind enough to put up the comparison site plan, it's called. It's got the that's the one. I know it doesn't show it very well on screen, but plot 1, which is the most northerly by Meadowcroft, at the front right-hand corner it shows a distance that is now 3.048 metres, so just over 3 metres, and it's been brought in by a reference point is the width of the parking spaces, which is 2.4 metres. So it's about, I would say it's been brought in about half that, about 1.2 metres, and then the same at the back. Where it says plot 1 in quite light writing, there's a little dash line there, and I would say that's been probably brought back a metre.
questions? Councillor Avery?
Yeah, just a minor point. The roads are going to be subject to heavy loads if the construction takes place. And I noticed this morning there were already indications of sinking in the road and water laying on the surface. Is there any plan to repair any damage done by the construction?
I think there'll be within the construction management plan. We can condition that there's a condition survey taken out ahead of obviously commencement of construction, and then anything that obviously as a result of construction traffic can be addressed. But obviously in terms of resolving existing issues along there, that's not something I think we can do. But yeah, we can definitely put measures into that construction management to make sure that any damage directly attributed to the construction traffic can be addressed.
Any further points? No? The recommendation is before us, but it's been suggested that we have an addition to that. Andy, do you want to put the thing in?
Yeah, I'd like to take call on Ian and Val, but I think at the minute the recommendation is to grant delegated authority to the Development Management Service Delivery Manager, subject to conditions and informatives. I think what we need to do is probably add, subject to the submission and agreement of a plan showing a deeper or longer parking spaces to be agreed by the Development Management Service Delivery Manager. Ian?
Yes, you'd almost be extending Val's delegation to receive an amended plan. It wouldn't be in a sense done by condition. It would be done by way of an amended plan being submitted and being approved. I think, have I got that?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we could just, we'll reword the delegation to Val to just incorporate that. And I think members are insisting on it.
I'd like to see it.
Yeah. And it's been offered. So we'd like to be hopeful. If there's any problems, we'll bring it back, because that's what.
Okay. So with the amended recommendation, the recommendation is before us. Those in favour, please show. Any against? One against. So that's allowed then, subject to satisfactory submission of amended plan. Okay. We'll then move on. Right, it's application TWC 2021/0010, and it's land opposite Wrap Film Systems Limited, Horton Wood 40. Andy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's a full application for the erection of an industrial/warehouse facility, B2/B8 use with ancillary offices. The site's located opposite Wrap Film on Horton Wood 40. I just need to note that we've incorrectly referenced the applicant on the top of the report. It should say Portion Solutions Limited, stroke Homes England, stroke Stowford Telford Limited, and not Greenhouse. So apologies to members and to the applicant. The application is before members as it is subject to a Section 106 to secure contributions to mitigate highways impact. Similar to the last application, there is a proposed amendment to the officer recommendation at the very end of the report. If I just let members get there. Instead of instead of saying a trigger to request £5,000 towards a traffic management scheme along the section of Hortonwood 4060 that fronts the proposed development, should it be required, we're proposing to replace it with £5,000 towards a traffic management scheme along Hortonwood 40, 45 and 60 in the vicinity of the site, should it be required. So in plain English, what that means is that we were going to call upon £5,000 if there was a problem. That was restricted to Hortonwood 40 to 60 that fronted the proposed development. But what we're proposing instead is that we will have £5,000 from the outset, and if a problem occurs, we will spend that along a slightly extended area of Hortonwood 40, 45 and 60 in the vicinity of the site rather than just along the site frontage. The reason for that is that the size of the unit has dictated that we need a car park management plan to ensure that there aren't too many cars on there at any one point. But the applicant could easily comply with that by not allowing anybody onto the site, and then it would spill out onto the adjoining highway. So that hence the need for the management, the contribution, so we can manage the highway accordingly. So that's it. That's it from me, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Case Benwick, please. You're both coming, are you? Yeah. Right.
Did you just share in 3 minutes?
Yeah, well, in this case, it's sharing 3 minutes, actually, is the rule. That's
fine, Chairman.
Yeah, okay, are you? Fine.
Ready?
Anytime you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Keith Fenwick. I'm the agent for the application. I'm here with Fiona Norfolk, who's Managing Director of Portion Solutions. Members, I have very little to add to the comprehensive planning report before you, save for confirming the support your officers have given and engaged very positively with us to help get this application through to committee for you. I'm going to hand over to Fiona, who's going to talk. It's her business. And she can talk about how important this site is for them in terms of bringing employment and investment into this part of Telford. So, Fiona.
Telford is the home of Portion Solutions, and the company's history goes back almost 40 years in the town. We employ approximately 250 people, including administrative staff, engineers, technical operators and warehouse operators. As a company, we work hard to provide training and development to our employees. We aim to have a dedicated and knowledgeable workforce who take pride in the products we offer. Our business is packing food. We take bulk food and use specialist equipment to pack the food into smaller portions to reduce food waste. We do not cook food or chill food, therefore we do not generate significant noise or smell, and our HGV movements are comparatively low. We supply all the major out-of-home food distributors, also supply distributors to retail and home-delivered meal kits. We supply the cost sector such as the NHS, care homes and the prison service. You and your family will have had our products at some point. We have stayed open through the pandemic and we are very proud of what we do. Like most companies, particularly those service the hospitality sector, we've had a very challenging year. However, we have the benefit of being owned by a large company and it is fully committed to this scheme. This new facility is a very exciting and major step in preparing Portion Solutions for the future. We currently operate out of 3 sites in Telford, all from leased buildings. Operating out of 3 buildings is inefficient, limits what we can do, and the buildings certainly are not suitable for Portion Solutions now, let alone in the future. Staying in these buildings is already having an impact on our growth, and we need to move quickly. If we do not move within Telford, we would either move out of Telford or we will see jobs put at risk. This new building will be purpose-built for us, owned by us, and used by us. It represents a significant investment, not only in the building itself, but also in the equipment that will be purchased for the fit-out of the facility.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Keith. Would you come back, Andy?
I haven't got anything further. Thank you, Chair.
All right, so for the committee to look at. Councillor Dugmore.
Thank you, Chair. Right, well, proposal for an industrial unit on an industrial estate. What's not to like, really? I mean, you know, it would be bizarre to refuse it. I mean, I would just like to point out that, you know, sort of there's been concerns over traffic gridlock. I'll still make me call again. A bus service through Horton Wood might be a good idea, really, because that would certainly help with any traffic issues. And you know, because I don't live too far away, I'm well aware of it. I mean, you know, sort of it's fine. You know, I know the site very well because I've driven past it on numerous times. So I'm quite happy with it. I'm quite happy to move it, unless anybody else wants to talk. Any other comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the annual sort of £5,000. Is that sort of like goes towards the bus taking people to work to Horton Wood and back, or you know, picking them up at odd hours in the morning or at 10 o'clock? Is that what it's for, or you know, it says, I'm just trying to say travel plan. What does that mean?
I'll just turn over to Mark for me.
Yeah, no, so the £5,000 that is being secured is to ensure that on-street parking measures can be put in location, because the site is providing below what we would normally expect for car parking, but that's actually, they've got a very robust argument for that in terms of the number of staff that they work and their shift patterns, but we also want that safeguard as well. To be able to put controls in the area if we need them. So that's what the £5,000 for. There is another £5,000 as well, which is for travel plan monitoring. So because it will be an employer of quite a large number of staff, is that we need to ensure that they are promoting sustainable modes of travel, that they're lift sharing when that's allowed, that type of stuff. So we secure £5,000 so an officer in the council can assist them and review that travel plan to ensure that it's meeting its objectives.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. I wasn't quite sure.
Councillor Dugmore actually moved the recommendation. Seconded down by. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. That's a quick show this afternoon.
Oh.
The next meeting is on the 2nd of June. The venue is to be confirmed.